Hey folks, George Leoniak. I'm going to come back with another video here at New Geometry. We're going to look at Frank Chester's work just a little bit more here. And once again, we're going to look at the inner core of the Earth and how Frank went about that. Just after I completed my previous video on the inner core of the Earth and star Chestahedron, Frank sent me an image that really made things click for me to discover how he went about discovering the inner core of the Earth through his methods. So we're going to take a look at that. Like always, I've got the slideshow set up here. I've got a few props here to help make things more clear as we go on. So yeah, please join me on this adventure into the inner core of the Earth with the Chestahedron. So let me share the screen here. And this image here is one that I had in my previous slideshow that I talked about. Frank's, he sent me this picture to start working on figuring out the inner core of the Earth. And, you know, I went about this in my own method of figuring out how to do it, which was quite different than, different than what Frank did. And it wasn't until he sent me this other image that it really clicked. And literally, this is like 6 or 7 minutes. I had just sent the video for Frank to take a look at the inner core one, star Chestahedron that I did. And then he sent this to me 6 minutes after I sent the video to him. And once I took a look at it, I finally understood what I needed to do to create his, to create the model that he did, because what he did was put the flower of life design, the 19 circles, and then he had the Chestahedron in the middle, and it was divided in half, the Chestahedron, a little less than half. But when Frank did the measurements, it was in half. And it created a central hexagon that was the central circle of the flower of life. Now, I went about it a little different because when I looked at Frank's book, he had another picture of the flower of life in there that was a painting of it. And I put the flower of life, I was trying to do this with the flower of life. And I realized that, well, this is not 0.618 because these vertices don't match up to the, I mean, they match up in the flower of life, but they don't actually produce the right size inner triangle to create the 1 to 0.618. So my method was really looking at it from a top-down perspective, but Frank, being such an awesome sculptor, he went about it quite different. Visually working with the forms in hand and creating it that way, whereas I'm looking at it mostly from what the drawing looks like and where those vertices will line up. So after I saw the picture in the globe here, I easily went back and constructed exactly what Frank had done, because that central hexagon that is in the Chestahedron, let me see if I got a Chestahedron. I've got one in the globe. There's a line in the middle that corresponds roughly to this edge of the sphere. One of those black lines in there is the central hexagon. And that is where he built the hexagon, built the Chestahedron, just one of them. I have two here, and I'll explain that in a moment because that's more of the star version of it. But I've got the two here, and that creates the center hexagon. But that means that these outer vertices of the Chestahedron, this one and this one, now this is the one that's in contact with the sphere. Now this sphere here would be the Earth, okay? So that would be the size of the Earth, and then this would be the central hexagon created over the flower of life. But these vertices then don't connect to the flower of life. But that's just how Frank designed it, because he based it on the central circle of the hexagon. And I looked at it of trying to figure out how these vertices of the triangles that are in these Chestahedrons, how they're going to connect. We both came up with the same results because Frank's outer circle here is ever so slightly so close to being exactly on the flower of life, within a hair's width, so it's totally very, very extremely accurate. And to come up with how the Chestahedron fits there and gives you the outer surface of the Earth. Now, the inner core was kind of the next mystery here, to figure out how the inner core related to this, because right now I can tell that this central shape here, if that was a cube by itself, would not touch this sphere. And then Frank wrote back, well, did you take a look and see if this hexagon, will the sphere fit inside it? And I tried that and that didn't work. But in just a moment, I'll show you, I did discover that that is going to work out too. For those who didn't watch the previous video, though, I just wanted to talk about the Chestahedron Merkaba, the star Chestahedron, as I'm calling it. And because I talk about that here. Now, when Frank looking at his version that he did, most of those are just, all he did was put the one Chestahedron in there. So this is what his Chestahedron would be looking like in the sphere. And this is what it would look like from some different views. I combined the two Chestahedrons together to kind of round out the top and the bottom. You could do it either way. It doesn't really matter. Although there is a new central point that's created between those two Chestahedrons right here that fits within the sphere. So now we wanted to find out where that central point is and how do we find the cube. And I went into this how I did it in my previous video on the Chestahedron, but Frank's method works too. I just had to reframe how it is that I was looking at what he created. I've got some close-ups of these images coming up in the next two slides, so don't struggle to try and see them, but I want to just describe briefly what I did because these two are scaled to the same size here. So we've got the Earth, we've got the core, and in my previous video, I tell you how I went about getting the size of the core. It's roughly a little over 1/5 the diameter of the Earth is the size of the core, inner core. But what I had to do to figure this out was that just like Frank built the hexagon of the Chestahedron as the central spot, you had to do that with the cube as well. So here is a cube, and I'm going to show you these all at the end. And if you're looking straight down at from above, you'll see that there's this line right here. Now that is where the Chestahedron that sits in there, it's the central line. So this is the upper triangle line. This is the lower triangle line, creating the star tetrahedron in the middle on the cube. You had to build this off the cube as well, okay? So that is where you had to do it. Just like he built the Chestahedron had to be done like that as well. So in here, I'm going to show you that this kind of orangish line that goes across is the same as this line. So you're actually looking at flower of life. If it's looking at straight down, it's like this circular pattern. But if you rotated it and looked at it kind of on a plane, horizontal, well, these circles represent these circles of the flower of life going across. And they create a hexagon that you can draw across, which are the same width as this yellow and the blue, are this hexagon that the Chestahedron's in, and this hexagon that the cube is in. And when you do that and build the sphere, it actually works out with a great amount of accuracy to get the inner cube to the outer Earth. Remember, my outer estimate of this core measurement is a little off anyway because it's 99.85% accurate. So there's definitely a little wiggle room with all within this. So this is what I wanted to describe real quick, is that in this blue star, I know it's hard to see here. I guess I could, let me zoom in for you just so you can get a look at what I've got going on here. So I've got the blue triangle and the other blue triangle, and that creates this hexagon in the middle. And this is the sphere around it. There's two layers of it because, like I said, they don't exactly line up 100% accurately, just like the Earth one doesn't line up to the Chestahedron, but it's so close. We're good enough with it. So like I said, this is really the only method that you're able to even get even closely accurate to the inner core of the Earth. So here's the hexagon that we're building this cube off of. So we've got the black cube, and the hexagon right here is connected to the inner edges of the hexagon that is the cube. So that is touching halfway along here. So essentially what you're doing is you're looking at this cube from above like this, and this black line that's sitting back here is halfway along this edge, and that's That's the cube. So when you build the cube off of that hexagon, which is in it the way Frank did it, that will then provide the √3 sphere that will come around here. Okay, so let me show you what it looks like from this view. Same yellow lines. This is the Chestahedron. That's the blue line that's got the Chestahedron. It's slightly tucked in because I'm going off the central hexagon that's created between the star Chestahedron. But same thing, if you drop this down like so, you'll see that it's going to touch this spot along the cube, just like you're dividing this cube in half along the center point. All right, right there. And then that just sits right in the middle of the Chestahedron, or roughly close to the middle of the Chestahedron, but in the star Chestahedron, it's in the middle. And then now that gives you the core to the outer edge of the Earth. So I just had to really reframe my thinking about it. And boy, I went on quite a journey with my own discoveries, which were awesome in and of itself, because they definitely link to a lot of the other things that I was exploring. I just happened to look through it through that frame of reference, and thankful for that, all the discoveries I made and everything in the previous video. But it's so great to see how Frank's model fits into here and totally works just as he described. Now, I just want to point out, because my previous video talks a lot about how I went about getting the inner core of the Chestahedron, which is the same as Frank's, but I went about it differently because, so here's how I did it, and I put it back into the flower of life. Now, in my model, I connect these Chestahedron vertices to the outer edge of the cube. I've got two Chestahedrons. You know, there's a lot more going on here. So you really have to figure out how to draw this Chestahedron off of this hexagon because you don't have it. But what I did here, just to compare my model and my method to Frank's, I did the triangle, the blue one here, within the way Frank set it up, which actually then creates a smaller hexagon. Let's zoom back in. Creates a smaller hexagon in here. So this is not connecting to the flower of life. It's created between the triangles of the Chestahedron. And then you work your way in, you do the stars. But what's going to happen there is that then actually this cube that is in the Earth will actually be the cube, this hexagon that touches the star. Okay, so it's kind of neat that you have two methods to do this. You could build it off of this method with the star, and that will give you the cube that actually touches, or how Frank did it, where he built it on the hexagon and then built the cube on the hexagon. I mean, his is more 3D accurate, and mine is more like a looking down from above of how to draw it from above based on these triangles that are above and below it. All right, so I hope that made sense in how to describe the differences between what Frank and I were doing, still coming up with the same result, as I said in the end, just two different approaches, basically applying our two skill sets, Frank being very much more of the sculptural, visual, working with it in hand, and I was applying the 3D, the drawings to this and figuring out what it looks like from the two different angles. So all in all, we've got two approaches. Now, I just want to follow up in the rest of this slideshow with something that I was working on that I think is really fascinating to me, because when you're looking at the Chestahedron from above and you have the tetrahedron as well, these triangles from above are the same size, the red and the blue. Now, you're not used to looking at a triangle like this or a tetrahedron like this, but all four of these vertices, or three that you see here, would be in contact with the sphere of the cube. Yeah, so a little tetrahedron. Let me just show you. I've got one over here. Pull this back in where you can see it. So, you know, normally we're in Flower of Life, you're looking at the tetrahedron straight up. Now, here you can look at it from the side, and that's what we're doing right there. So the sphere is dramatically going to change when we look at it. And same thing with the Chestahedron, right? But from above, the only way you could tell, and you can't tell when you just draw two triangles on top of each other like this classic Star of David look, you can't tell that this Chestahedron, it's actually a Chestahedron, or is it a star tetrahedron? You know, because the base triangles of the Chestahedron are the same, overlapping. Now you do have this triangle, which we know the Chestahedron has that, and that's the one that creates the base to phi relationship between the base and the upper end, because remember, this is a pentagon face, and I haven't drawn that in. So that would be the one difference, but that adds phi to the whole pattern, which of course I'm discovering is super important to these drawings. So I wanted to elaborate on this just a little bit. And I know this looks like quite a busy drawing, but I'm going to explain it to you because I think it was really neat, because here again, I built out that seed of life drawing, which would be these bigger circles. And you basically can build it all the way out. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 circles in a row. Now, if anybody's familiar with sacred geometry, this would be 13 circles of the fruit of life. Fruit of life, essentially connected to Metatron's cube. And now I wanted to show you in this cross-section view that if you take the whole flower, that whole fruit of life pattern, and rotate it once again, so you're looking through it at a cross-section, well, then it's so neat. It was so neat for me to discover that if you draw this dotted line that connects to this circle right here, there's that circle. And of course, as you go, A, B, and C are all going to line up. Now, these purple triangles are representing the blue and the red together. I hope that's purple. The blue and the red together, A, B, and C all line up right at that point. But from the side, when you rotate the whole thing, everything, then you could see the dimensionality of this. Otherwise, the two patterns are over top of one another, other than this blue circle, which is the phi circle that you need to create the Chestahedron from above. But for the base triangles, there's no way to tell the difference between these two drawings. Similarly, if we go over and look at this dotted line, now that's going to correspond to the base of this triangle right here. And if we go up, that's going to correspond to the base of the tetrahedron, as well as the Chestahedron, and that fruit of life point right there. Of course, the center is the stacked vertices. And it was neat for me to discover that there's really no way to draw these circles out from the fruit of life that they'll connect either to the Chestahedron point or to the tetrahedron point. So it's really like this was just a hexagonal slice through these forms. And it didn't like I could draw the circles and all of a sudden it would give me the point of the tetrahedron or the Chestahedron. Now you see these orange circles here that touch up to here. Well, that was the estimated Earth core size for the size Earth. That would touch up here because that was how that was done with the Earth to core dimensions. But if you just did this circle and brought it all the way up, the black circle, the little one, it touches neither of these, okay? So I think that's just an important point, that neither of those, that the flower of life in this view, or the whole fruit of life, really appears to just be giving you kind of like a hexagonal perspective of this from a drawing perspective, from a top-down view. And once you rotate it to any other view, it all changes. All those spheres are going to all stack differently. So similarly, LM and N, that all correspond to these points that would be all lined up right here. And then this point right here, this P, Q, and O, OP and Q, correspond to this section. So hopefully that's just kind of like some X-ray vision goggles or rotational goggles into that iconic pattern of the fruit of life, and how we really can't tell from above whether we're looking at the Chestahedron or the star tetrahedron from above, the cube. Yeah, so I elaborated on this a little bit further here. And this is an image that I did. I'm going to describe a kind of new form, because remember, the star Chestahedron, if you connect the outer vertices of that, it creates its own form, because you'll create just like the star tetrahedron, like this star tetrahedron. Once you connect these dots, from the points, it basically is encased in a cube, right? So I did the same thing with the Chestahedron, and I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. But first, I wanted to show you that when you're looking at these two from above, so now one of these is the joined version, meaning it's the Chestahedron connected. And I'll just say it's this one over here. And this is the cube from above, right? They have the same hexagon view in the seed of life pattern. The only difference really is one line, and it's this one right here. And that would be part of one of the tetrahedrons within the cube. And there, these crosses that go on the cube face are tetrahedron points, whereas in the Chestahedron, star Chestahedron, stretched out cube that I'm talking about, that point, that line there that's going across, which would be here and here, well, that's a dotted line there, and here it's a solid line, meaning it's down into the form, on the bottom of the form. But when you draw these, you really cannot tell, unless you emphasize the lines, which are which. Now, here's another clue in this drawing. Now, the Chestahedron, really, when you're looking at it from a top-down view, it's in this sphere here. There's a lot of space around the Chestahedron. You'll never be able to know from just a drawing, you'll never be able to find that circle unless you do something else to figure out where it is, another version of it, and then bring that over. And similarly with the cube, this is where the circle would be around the cube from above, the √3 sphere that goes around this. The cube is slightly sunken in from that. From perspective orientation, you can't tell which is which, other than the spheres are going to be different and what lines you emphasize. So this just is clearly showing me that, like, the Chestahedron, this version that I'm about to show you where they're connected dots, you really can't tell that it's in there because the phi relationship circle in the Chestahedron is kind of hidden within this form now. So let me just show you once again. Here are two pictures of one of these is the real cube, and the other one is the Chestahedron cube. Now, it might be obvious to you to see which one is which, just based on the sharpness of the lines. But if you kind of just, sit back and just kind of squint your eyes a little bit, you might be able to tell that, you might see that there's not really all that much of a difference in these two shapes. Of course, it's a perspective, so it's not looking like a perfect hexagon in either of them because the edges are sloping in. But these are totally different forms. And this one over here is the Chestahedron, star Chestahedron in its encased form. And this, of course, is the regular cube. Now, this is what this form looks like from the side to show you that it's all a matter of perspective. Once we turn that upright and look at it, we could see that, well, it's certainly not a cube at all, but from the 2D drawings, we're looking at the same form here. This hexagon point, this red line, which is this inner hexagon, essentially is this right here. And that's what this is here. And it divides the cube, it divides this whole thing at the halfway point, just as this does. So it's really kind of mind-bending to think that all you've done is just expanded the distance between the tetrahedrons, which we could tell in perspective, like my hand looks huge here and it's back, this one's way back here, But once we come to a flat 2D plane, like a drawing, they're over top of each other. So anyway, this is what this looks like, this star Chestahedron in this outer casing. I built the net for it. So I could build it, and it's here right here. It's kind of unusual looking form. It's definitely not a cube, that's for sure. So, both the Chestahedrons are in here. The thing that you don't actually see is where that inner phi-based triangle would be within relationship to the base. You see it's down in the form a little bit more and doesn't connect up to the top. But so basically it's two Chestahedrons which are providing this spacing between this triangle and this triangle. And you have to imagine that both Chestahedrons are in there, because once you take them away, well, then this is what you're left with. And you have a hexagon that divides it in half all the way around. I know that's tough to see from there. I'll show you these at the end. And just a little bit before this video, I made an interesting discovery that I'll put in here because it's almost a golden ratio. So here is the portion of the net for that star chestahedron stretched out cube form that I'm showing you here, this one. And here is the cube face. So this is one of these cube faces. And the amazing thing to me was that they both have the same length hexagon, meaning they both share the same hexagon, which I thought was really fascinating that both the forms do that. And the other thing is, I decided to put the cube right on here so the hexagon meets the cube. And I said, well, let's just check out this distance from here to here. And, I figured out the golden ratio off that cube that I built, this little cube that I put in here. And it swung down and it's very imperceptible, but there's a little bit more length to this. It's almost the golden ratio, 1 to 0.618. I'm not actually sure of the measurement. But that was just really neat because it's kind of like the cube has been inflated. It's kind of expanded in its size and stretched out the width of the height of the cube, and then kind of almost made a golden ratio length relationship between the length of the original edge of the cube to now this new length that's connected along here. Very, very close to the golden ratio. Okay, one other thing, so one last thing to follow up on before I'm just about done with this video. I think this one's going to be a lot shorter than the other ones. So in the other previous video, I decided to say, well, rather than have like the let me just back up and show you what I mean by this. Rather than have all the tetrahedrons line up so that they're one on top of the other in this stacked way, I wanted to inflate this tetrahedron in here, the whole cube, so that it touches the surface of the sphere just like the chestahedron does. And I was going to rotate that around so it would be on the opposite end of the this tetrahedron up here. And kind of just started working, discovering a new form based on that. So here is the cube that's also in the Earth sphere now, because remember the chestahedron gave us the Earth dimension to the inner core. And now I've created another cube and I've placed that within here. And that one is also touching the surface all the way around. So we've got the chestahedron providing these points on the surface. They're sharing the up and down central vertices. And then the cube is creating some new vertices on that sphere. So I went ahead and built that. This is what it looks like from above. Remember, this is the cube that will be touching the sphere. This is the chestahedron touching the sphere. And there's the seed of life. This one almost connects out to the flower of life points, or to the fruit of life points. And so this is what this looks like from above. So this point right here, this is the upper and lower vertice. This point right here corresponds to that point. This point right here corresponds to this point. These lower points will correspond to the cube that's in there. And then this is what it's going to be looking like from above. All right. This image should be rotated around. So let's do that real quick. And yes, so here's the upper points of the cube. And there is the chestahedron points right here, which would be there and there. So once again, looking like a cube from above. That would be the cube part, and there would be the chestahedron pushing out those points. And I've got that built right here. I'll show you that a little bit. It's kind of interesting, unusual form. But the neat thing is it will fit into a sphere with all the points in contact with the outer edge. And I just wanted to show you a little bit of the net of this. This is half of the net. And basically, I had to build this off of this form. These bars all correspond. The blue ones connect to the blue lines. The black connect to the black. And the orange connect to the orange lines, and the red connect to these red lines here. And, it's quite fun, kind of a little bit of a discovery of how to make sure these are all the same length. The hardest one in here to discover was what was the length of the black line, because if you get that messed up, it will all come up messed up, but you have some lengths in here to help you figure that out. And basically I did that all just with geometry and figuring out how to look at it. And I didn't need to do any mathematics with that at all. It's just like the geometry contained everything you needed to know from these various perspectives to build the net accurately. So, okay, well, let me just conclude. I'll just go back to the beginning and just show you to wrap this up, because this is really what this video was about, plus a few of my minor discoveries along the way, was that yes, the Chestahedron that Frank did with the hexagon in the middle clearly fits within this flower of life pattern. And, that sphere is the Earth and fits with his Chestahedron and the central hexagon that it's built off of, as well as the cube that would be built within that as well. So, yeah, pretty cool. That was really neat. Like I said, it was like 6 minutes after I sent that video in, Frank sent me that image, and all of a sudden it was like the light bulb went off. And I was like, wow, I can't believe I just talked for like almost an hour in the previous video trying to describe what I'd done to figure out essentially the same thing. And Frank's method totally worked. But if I didn't do it my way, I wouldn't have made all those other discoveries. So I'm totally thankful for that. I just wanted to point out, well, here's the cube, and this would be like the hexagon that Frank built in the center of the Chestahedron. So he put it right at that dividing line, and that just sat right within the Chestahedron. So if these might actually be scaled roughly to the same size, but that cube would fit in a little Chestahedron. In that Chestahedron, there'd be a little tiny cube at the center of that. And now this is the other form, and I just wanted to point this out again. So here are our two, from this view, the two potentially, the two versions that look very cube-like, or are cube-like for one of them. And, when I rotate these, well, this is that stretched out almost phi relationship edge in relationship to the cube edge. And that's what this one looks like. Now, this has got the star Chestahedron in the middle. It's quite unusual looking form. The cube is much more condensed, but like I said, you can't deny that this is not in the flower of life pattern. It just depends on, like I said, what lines you emphasize. Because the Chestahedron is within that pattern, all you have to do is draw the phi-based circle. And in my next videos that are coming up, I'm going to show you that those phi-based circles for the flower of life and the fruit of life, they are essential to drawing all the platonic solids correctly. It's like a whole new version of the seed of life that's going to really be kind of mind-blowing. It's been mind-blowing for me of how to create all those patterns totally accurately with much, much more polygon shapes, 5-pointed stars, 9-pointed stars, all coming out of the same pattern. It's just incredible. But anyway, so these are these two forms that I was showing you, and this is the version of the conglomeration of the larger cube with the Chestahedron that was in there. And remember, this is now got the shared vertices of the two cube and Chestahedron. And then these are the upper Chestahedron points here. And these are the lower cube points down here. One or two of them right there, here and here. Those two. So yeah, it's pretty fun to try and figure out how to make these forms after discovering it on the paper, just to make sure they're actually something. And so I think that really kind of does the best I can to wrap up all that work on the Chestahedron that started 3 videos ago. And once again, I'm super grateful that Frank has been involved in this process, that I've been able to share some of these images. And I sent them the first Golden Chestahedron video like 2.5, 3 weeks ago. And then ever since then, we've been working and discussing this. He's been asking me questions about what I'm doing and providing a picture every once in a while to have me go back and look at everything again. So I think the main point of this is just never give up. Like once you think you've discovered something and you're all like cozy and you're all set up and you're like, that was great, I'm done, I figured it all out. Video 3 described everything. I just kept at it, with him asking a few questions, just really trying to understand, and it expanded my thinking, expanded my consciousness greatly to discover that central hexagon within there and how that fit in there, because I wasn't thinking in that way at all. So that just really increased my capacity, as Frank likes to say, how we increase our capacity of what we bring with us, what we keep along the journey. So yeah, so I'm really grateful once again to share this. And some other news, Frank and I have been talking. It sounds like later this week, after this video comes out, whenever that might be, him and I are going to get on and just kind of do a discussion and conversation about this. And hopefully he's going to share a lot more on a whole other side of the Chestahedron related to the heart and many of the discoveries he found there. Since I've been mostly working on the earth core element of things, there's just so much more information that Frank has uncovered, and how much this form has really expanded his consciousness in making all the connections that have been really valuable, not only to us two, but to scientists, researchers, and essentially, all of humanity. So once again, I'm grateful for the time together, and look out for the next video with Frank and I. Until then, have a great rest of your week. Much love, and I'll see you later.